Hey friends, so today we're talking about daycare portraiture, and that's a really important thing. A few weeks ago I posted a video just about a couple things you need to know if you're going to start photographing for daycares and different small groups in order to get your portraiture business up. And you think about large companies like Lifetouch and Prestige Photos and Olin Mills. They've got this national market going on, and the reality is it's very difficult to break into that. In fact, it's very difficult to even be taken seriously as a photographer when you're trying to solicit daycares, preschools, and small church organizations, as well as just small little Montessori schools, or even larger independent schools. It can be very difficult. So here we're going to talk about that. Tracy Boykins, this answer is actually for you, my friend. So think about this for a second. I only have a few subscribers. We've got like maybe 620 subscribers on this channel. And this is the type of question that maybe this video might only get like 60 views in the next year. It probably won't get very many. The morning meeting videos don't get very many views. So I'm answering this question for you, Tracy. So that should show you that us in this community really need to reach out and stick together. Thank you for asking me these great questions. Where do I get custom backdrops for my Westcott X-Drop backdrop? There's a lot of ops in that sentence. And the reality is, lots of times you can get a custom backdrop made anywhere from Amazon to Backdrops Express, anywhere that allows you to upload your own image. Generally speaking, I'll use Backdrops Express, or maybe I'll use Adorama, maybe I'll send it out to B&H. It just depends, but you can get a custom backdrop in those areas pretty easily. And let's talk about custom backdrops for a second. You don't need to have a custom school monogrammed backdrop for every school that you're going to. In fact, having more generic backdrops will be much more helpful for you because you'll be able to use them in a variety of situations. Now, when I do go and photograph kids at a daycare or a day school, I make sure that I'm bringing with me a couple of different backdrops just in case the lighting or the area that I'm going to be set up in isn't working that day. And I also make sure that I rotate my backdrops out. Recently, I used a white backdrop and gave everybody that model shoot kind of look with a three-point lighting, and that allowed the the images to just have a beautiful stark white background, and all the focus has been able to be placed on the kiddos. Last time I used a floral pattern. The time before that was a winter time, and I used just like a wintry scene, just kind of a bluish scene, but nothing specifically winter. One thing that I do think about, or I do use, that's important with backdrops is, since Olin Mills and since these national companies have such a very standard corporatized look, right? I try to make mine look something different. I think about setting up my photo session for each kid as like a boutique photo session. So I go in there thinking about my lighting, 3 and 4 points of lighting. I think about the backdrop. I think about what they're going to sit on, and because sometimes that'll be in the picture. And then I think about a way to pose the kids. I've got 3 or 4 different types of poses. This is going to go into another question, but I don't produce 3 or 4 different poses for every kid. I use the best pose for 90% of the kids, and then if kids look awkward with that pose, I'll switch to another one. Generally speaking, I'm shooting a 3/4 length or a hips up on a stool, or a standing headshot, more of a chest up portraiture. Guys get their arms crossed, ladies get their arms brought together like that. But when it gets down to backdrops, I choose a backdrop that looks very boutique for what it is I'm doing. So in springtime, I do more of I use a more spring, pastel colors, brights, things like that. And I make sure that I'm using more of a 3/4 or a full length type of portrait for these little guys and gals. So the next question that I've got is, what's an alternative to Google Forms? I suppose, Tracy, you're asking about what kind of word processing that I use, and the real important part is there that you need to create a professional form. The form's got to look good for people to order from, and the larger part of all this comes together in one of 2 ways, and this is going to tie into a little bit of another question, but I'll go over all of these things quite separately. Tracy is asking about these forms, and the form for me is important because when I photograph the school, since most of my schools only get about a 50% sell-through, and in order for it to be economical for me to print my own images for every student and have a package ready, like I guess you would say the competition, I would need to have more like a 60 or 70% sell-through. You have to realize that when you're running your business, it gets down to money, it gets down to accounting, and you must understand very much so what your costs are going to be. So there's always a cost-benefit analysis when you want to do something like a physical print or a gift print or a proof print. What I found out is that attempting to put everything online and then giving out information for the teachers to go or for the parents to go and find their students' stuff online, I get like maybe a 10 or 15% sell-through. People just are too busy, they won't do it. What I found also is that it doesn't allow me to have any additional purchases or add-ons, and it also takes quite a bit of time for me to set all that up through private galleries in Lightroom. And that's the software that I use in order to do all of my printing and everything. So for me, I must use something that makes sense. And at a 50% sell-through, that means that I need to go ahead and just print individual images. I do a 2x3 image and I place it on a board. I don't have any to show you, but I make a board with all the teachers. I just use poster board, or I go and I laminate just some I don't know what you call it, just not poster board, but poster paper. And I make a nice thing. It's Miss Laura's 4th grade class, or 3rd graders or whatever. And I put a nice picture of Miss Laura in the middle, and I put the pictures of the kiddos around, and I send it through and have it laminated. Now, if you don't send it through and have it laminated, what will happen is someone will tear off the photo, okay? So that puts you at a disadvantage. Now, since I made that video, I actually had 7 parents tear off little photos, and then I guess they put them online. Luckily, I use very special software, and you can find it, Tiny Print, Tiny Eye software, which puts a digital pattern inside of the actual print itself, which your eye wouldn't recognize, but is a code that web services can crawl, and then they can find out if someone is using that picture or image somewhere. It's very important. It's called Tiny Eye. You should check it out. There's plenty of them. Just Google print encryption or photo encryption software, and you'll find lots of them. It does cost money, so there's an added cost there. So if you want to be able to put stuff up like that and then have tracking of it, you're going to have to think about that. But generally speaking, putting the images up on a poster board is not too difficult. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to put the image up. I generally put a watermark over the image, specifically if I've got a school that is notorious that's taken an image, or I think that they will, or for whatever reason they just give me the feeling that they're going to be snapping photos of the images and putting them online. I also put a watermark up there in order to help keep that from happening. But the reason that this is important is because either the teacher or the parent then come and either remove that image or write down the image number. And then I use that on the form. My form has 2 or 3 image slots. They can put the images up there, write down the numbers, and tell me what package they want. And that allows me to then identify them in my system and go ahead and print the image. Now, I can print however much I want. It doesn't really matter. What's most important about this process is that I'm getting the name and the number and the email address of the parent for the student. And I'm also getting the student's the actual image. I either get a picture of the image and I just match image to image, or I get the number and I match image to image. It's very important that once I get this and I turn these over to the school, that the teachers make sure that I've actually identified the right student. So it's a double check process. One other thing that I will say about forms is whatever you do, I'm considering moving over to a carbon copy triplicate system, whereby the form is an order form that I have and provide to the school, that the parents fill it out and it creates 3 copies, a top, middle, and a bottom. And that will allow me to keep one for my records, keep one for the school's records, and have one attached to the actual envelope that I give the parents. Now, the envelope that I give is just a 9x12 envelope. I'm getting ready to switch my sizes to be 8x12 all the way down, so I might go up to a 9 or like a 10x13 inch envelope. But what I do, and I just don't have a form here, so I just staple the form to the front with all the information on it, put the kid's paperwork in there, and then seal it shut. There's an image on the front of the kid that goes back to them because it verifies that it's the same image, and that's how I do it. The form looks nice and people enjoy it. That's the only update that I would do, but once again, if you're going to start ordering forms in triplicate, that's going to cost money, and you need to be at a school that's going to provide enough for you to make some money off of that. These last couple questions that you've got are really like spitfire questions. They're fast questions, right? So I'm going to read them off right here. Let's put this together. Right now, you're asking about like sizes, you're asking about poses, you're asking if I have an assistant, you're asking if the parents complain, and whether or not they're tech savvy. We're going to round all that up, and we kind of touched on a little bit of it before, but let's put a bow on it real nice. No, the parents aren't tech savvy. No, they don't understand aspect ratios. So if you provide an 8x10 image or a 2x3 image, you as a photographer ought to recognize immediately that a 3x2 aspect ratio image doesn't fit on an 8x10. It gets cut off a little bit. Think about that. So let's do some mathematics. What's a natural size of a photo? Your sensor in actually all of our cameras, APS-C and full frame, it's a 3x2 aspect ratio. Unless you're shooting micro four thirds, where then you get into a 4x3 aspect ratio. 4x3 aspect ratio is much, much closer to 8x10 than is 3x2. But if you look at it naturally, you can say 4x3, that's one size. The next whole size it goes up to is an 8x6. Okay? The next whole size it goes up to is a 12x9. Okay? 12x9. So those are the whole sizes that it goes up to where the entire image will fit on that page. The next one is, let's talk about 3x2. Well, 3x2 goes to 6x4. We know about 6x4. The next one up, it goes 9x8. Okay. The next one up, it's going to go 12x10. Okay. So we can do a 10x12 on there. 12x8. Excuse me. We can do an 8x12 on that page and have that be the natural sensor size. So we've got to put those things together so that they make sense for us as photographers. Your parents aren't going to get that. So it's what you need to do is put out an example of your package, and I'll take one kid or two kids or whoever that I like for each grade, and I'll put an example of what a package would look like. So I'll put an 8x10, I'll put two 6x8s, and I'll put four 4x5s or 3x5s or whatever my package is, and I'll put that out there so people can see one image and what it will look like on all those different sizes. So they're not tech savvy, they're not going to go online, they're not going to look at your website, they're not going to most likely order additional photos. I mean, these are just my experiences, which means that you have to be able to provide a one-stop solution at the time of purchase. You ask where you get the DS80, go ahead and Google it. You can find the DS80 all over the place. They're around $1,100 for the DS80 to work for you in-house. And you might be able to find one used for $500 or $600. The concern there is that these printers are made to go around 100,000 prints and then service. So if you're buying a used one at 80,000 prints, then you've only got about 20,000 prints, and depending on how many pictures you print a year, you may need service sooner than later, so it may be better for you just to buy a new one rather than an older one. The worst part is you won't know that until you get the DS80, install the software, and check the lifetime print counter. I purchase all of my print supplies from Imaging Spectrum, mainly because they not only provide the DS80, they have all kinds of different printers that can help you. The people there are very knowledgeable. They will be very helpful. They had the best pricing for me, as well as they produce some of their own paper. So I could buy the D&P Dynapone imaging printing paper for the D&P DS80. That's around $225 for the 8x10 stock, which gets you 220 or 240 pages or whatever it is. However, you can buy also Imaging Spectrum's paper and toner, which isn't toner, it's really a ribbon. This is a dye sublimation printer, which you should learn about that if you're thinking about doing this stuff. You need to know what printer you want to use, which means if you're not tech savvy, you probably shouldn't do it. If you're only creative and you're only there because you take an excellent photo, then you need help. And you need technical help. Imaging Spectrum will be able to help you there, kind of like a partner, but you'll need help on the other end. If you're not able to do and print and cut and everything in your own office, you're going to set yourself up for failure, because what will happen is you'll start creating prints that don't look like the print, the image on your screen, and you won't know why, and then everybody will be unhappy. Your printer, your screen, your camera, they all have to use the same calibration. And when you look at these images on different devices, they will look differently, and you have to be savvy enough to explain to mom and dad why their image may look different on their phone. Let's say you provide them with a digital copy than it does on their computer screen. They're going to think it's your fault, because they're not tech savvy. If you don't understand the ability or your capabilities here, and if you can't explain to them that, hey, yeah, your image looks like the finalized printed image, however, on your screen, which is calibrated with a different color profile and gamma curve, it looks different because of those reasons. If you were using my screen, they would look exactly the same. If you did do that and you held up a print image to an LCD or an IPS display panel or something like that, you would then see something different. The LCD would be brighter. And why? Because it's a screen that's emitting light rather than an image which is refracting and reflecting light. So you have to recognize that even when you hold them up from place to place, they're going to be differences when you look at it. What you're looking at for is a particular color point and temperature and a white point on your screen that will match your print process and will match your paper outcome. This is also affected by the light. This is a fluorescent light right here. There's a lot of green, so the camera's white balancing off of that. If you took this light away and you turned an incandescent light in here, which is much more cooler in color temperature, it's much more orange, then your prints would look different. So if you're taking them to display at the school and people are saying, why does it look different outside than inside? I don't know why anybody would ask that question. If you nailed your colors right, it should be fine. But in different lights, your things have a different color. That's why if you go to like Home Depot or if you go to Best Buy and you're looking at all the home automation lighting kits, and they'll show you the LED bulbs that can do the spectrum of lighting. They'll show you what warm and cool light looks like. Well, this is a lot of stuff. So Tracy, and for you guys out there, if you're getting into printing and doing all these things yourself, and this sounds complicated to you, then it probably is a cautionary tale. You have to relax a little bit and start doing some more research. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do any of this. It means that you need to slow down and start getting a good fix on what you're doing. I'm going to continue out. You ask about assistants. No, I don't have assistants. I do have assistants for weddings. I haven't ran into the need for an assistant for school photos like this. Generally speaking, shooting and photographing 200 children or less in 4 hours is pretty simple. It's 50 kids an hour. So as long as you have a plan, you can accomplish it. If you are by any means unnerved by this, if you can't get in and work with kids very quickly, then you may need help. If you can't make a plan and action to the plan, then you may need some help. If the teachers expect you to do everything, then you may need some help. What this means is that you have to sit down and think about your workflow. Set up this mock location in your home or somewhere, and then start thinking about it. Look at it. What's going on? Do you really have time to go and put every kid on the stool? No. If they're 2-year-olds in Mrs. Gina's class, Miss Gina needs to put them on the stool for you. She needs to sit there and help them. And guess what? Miss Gina's not going to have any problem with that, as long as you present yourself as a professional and as this is part of the plan when they come in. When Miss Gina comes in, you can say, okay, Miss Gina, we're going to set them all up here just like this. Can you help me with the rest of them? And shake your head while you do that. And Miss Gina's going to say yes or no. If she says, well, my hip's hurting today, then I'm say, I'm going to need you to go get Mrs. Laura or Miss Dora or Miss Felicia or Miss so-and-so to help me out because this needs to happen. Also, if you set that up with the school coordinator, they will have someone there to do those things. And those are the things that you learn over time that make this much more easy for you. I guess the last kind of part of the question, I'm going to make sure I answered, with the proof sheets and how many poses. Like I said earlier about the poses, it depends. I come with one pose for the kids, period. And then I branch out. And I've practiced that pose myself. I understand how to get the look. I recognize where the camera should be. I've developed what that looks like in my frame and in my mind so that I can put those things together. And it's quite simple. Most of the time I set the kids on a stool. I cross the ladies across their legs at the ankles and bring their knees together, put their hands like this on top of their little thigh or their knee, and have them look at the camera. You don't ever want anybody to be straight sideways like this and turning, and you don't normally, they shouldn't be straight on. With these kids, you want kind of at a 45 or a 30 degree and kind of looking at you. And you don't want this front arm doing that. You kind of want it to sit down. And if they're crossing their arms like that, then you want them to, you don't want, lots of times people do that's wrong. You want them to kind of look like that and to just smile, kind of look over. And if it's a little girl, you might put her head up like that and pose her like this. All right? And if it's a guy, he might sit here and kind of look at us like that. These are poses you have to practice. Sit in a mirror and look at yourself or buy a book. But more importantly, you got to do that research. So for anybody watching this, when you're thinking about posing, you've really got to put the pose together for the kids, and you have to own that pose yourself. And these are shots. So when you think about a particular shot, you're thinking about your pose, and this is the product that you're selling. You're selling poses. You're selling shots. So once you get the head shot, once you get the three-quarter, once you get the bust shot, once you get the profile, once you get the leaning, once you get the arms crossed, once you get all these different shots, you now have a repertoire of shots that you can put in your arsenal and you can use whenever they're necessary. For most kids, we sit them down on the stool and do like this, or I might bring like a little pillar and prop them up against something. It just depends, and that allows them to feel comfortable most of the time. For the ones that don't feel comfortable with that, I switch to a different pose or ask them how they'd like to sit. But the whole time, I try to make sure that they're comfortable with what they're doing. If they're not comfortable, you won't get a good photo. If you don't get a good photo, no one will buy the photo. There's no reason to. Finally, we've asked about the individual cutout. So my proof that I put with my watermark on there is an actual 3x2 photo, and I printed out right here on the DNP DS80 so that I know it's going to look exactly the way that they get it. So there you go. So your next question, Tracy, is how many kids do I photograph at a time? And that really depends. Most of the schools that I photograph for, I will have around 150 to 200 kids to do, and I'll have to photograph them in 4 hours. And I do that in a very determined process. See, when you plan everything ahead of time, like we were talking about a moment ago, you'll realize that you can position your kids and your setup and your gear in such a way so that all the kids need to do is walk in, sit down, take the picture, and then leave. Now, another question that might come up that you didn't ask is like, what do you do with kids that won't smile? And what I have found is, since I photograph mainly from pre-kindergarten 2- and 3-year-olds all the way up to 6th graders, that's as far as I go, the most important thing for me to do is make sure that I come ready to help the children have a good time. Some kiddos definitely have preferences. You know, they don't like being in front of the camera, things like that. So I might have a little fuzzy teddy bear that I put on the camera that squeaks and makes a little noise. For some of the older kids that get more pop culture kind of references and think about songs, I'll ask them what their favorite song is, and then I'll try to sing the tune, or even if I start singing "Row, Row, Row Your Boat" after that, for that one split second I'm behind the camera after I have them sitting down, I get a great smile. It just gets that really cool look that I enjoy. There are also kids that are just naturally turned on. I don't know what I'm trying to say there. Naturally, like, on. They have that always on personality. They always act like little actors. They're always on stage. And what that means is that sometimes I'll just let them choose their own pose, whatever I can get a genuine and authentic smile out of. But yeah, generally it takes me about 4 hours to shoot and photograph up to about 200 kids. All right, guys, we have come to the end of it. Tracy, I have really enjoyed your question. You put some great questions there. Thanks for reaching out to me. I hope this has been helpful. Just go ahead and make some comments down below and let me know what you guys think.